This is Module 1, Lecture 4 on plagiarism, and we ask two questions. What is plagiarism, and what are the consequences? So we will see that plagiarism has a very expansive definition, and we need to spend time considering it specifically and selectively, and then think about what might be the consequences. How might we be punished, either with ethical sanctions or through the legal system uh, if we are guilty of plagiarism. So first, we note that there are many online resources, and I use this one as an example for plagiarism in a grant proposal as a quick introduction, kind of a quick case study with a brief discussion. You are making steady progress on the research for the doctorate working in large lab, and you have written a report for large lab on some of that experimental work. Another group in large lab has been desperate for grant support to allow another student to finish up a master's degree. After one of their proposals is funded, you note that what they propose to do is exactly what you already did and described in your report for large lab. Questions are, what can or should you do? And what is the relative seriousness of plagiarism in a proposal and plagiarism in a publication? And how, if at all, might some of the damage be remedied? So this is very important. To whom do you go and speak with first? What type of investigation must you perform? What type of evidence will you have to produce? Really, what risk of harm are you placed in by such actions? And they should always be considered as substantial, but weighed appropriately. What is the relative seriousness? It is always very serious, and the sanctions can be significant. In the case here, the funding should be pulled away from the research group, and the institution should consider taking action on the PI if the PI of the lab was responsible for this, which very likely the individual was. So large lab is in big trouble, and most likely, very likely, there is an obligation for the individual detecting this to take action and report it up through the channels within the system, possibly going to the chair of the department first, if not taking it to the attention of the PI initially. How, if at all, might some of the damage be remedied? This is extremely difficult. Professional apologies, stemming from that all the way to possible fines by the funding agency on the PI or by the federal system on the PI for or whatever the source of the support, the funding was, for taking funds under false pretense. So these are broad areas of consideration and an extensive level of impact. So from our textbook by Shamu and Resnick, there's a definition. Plagiarism is wrongfully representing someone else's ideas, words, paintings, or other expressions as one's own. So in part, what we need to determine in evaluating the seriousness is motive. So what is the motive of the individual, and who is ultimately responsible for initiating the plagiarism, and then who all, what is the collective group that is involved, and wherein lies the ultimate motive. So who originated the ultimate motive with the deceit, the intention to deceive. There are many different forms of plagiarism, not all of which are as extreme as copying a paper word for word. And we'll go through these. So a statement on plagiarism from the American Association of University Professors. We have stated previously that there is no union per se for those in academia, but there are professional societies and groups. And the American Association of University Professors is a national union, if you will, for university professors. It's been in place many years, and if you find yourself in academia, I strongly recommend that you consider membership and determining all of the resources that are available from the American Association of University Professors. So since its founding has concerned restraints upon the right of faculty members to inquire, to teach, to speak, and to publish professionally. Yet throughout its existence, the association has emphasized the responsibilities of faculty members no less than their rights. And whenever you see responsibilities, you know that accountability accompanies it. Both rights and responsibilities support the common good served by institutions of higher education, which in the words of the 1940, as I said, they've been in place for a long time, Statement of Principles on Academic Freedom and Tenure, depends upon the free search for truth and its free exposition. So freedom of speech and exposition, public presentation of that with responsibility and accountability. In its Statement of Professional Ethics, the association has stressed the obligation of professors to their subject and to the truth as they see it, as well as the need for them to exercise critical self-discipline and judgment in using, extending, and transmitting knowledge. Defending free inquiry by their associates and respecting the opinions of others in the exchange of criticism and ideas, professors must also be rigorously honest in acknowledging their academic debts. And this is the key overall umbrella for plagiarism, acknowledging all academic debts. Whether somebody gave you a gift of a reagent or contributed in an idea, or if you have quoted some of their statements, or as well commented on some of their work, and you cite the reference. So it's a broad-reaching definition. So in light of recent concerns within and outside of the academic profession, it has seemed salutary to restate these general obligations with respect to the offense of plagiarism. Definition: the offense of plagiarism may seem less self-evident in some circles now than it did formerly. Politicians, business executives, and even university presidents depend on the ideas and literary skills of committees, aides, and speechwriters in the many communications they are called on to make inside and outside of their organizations. When ideas are rapidly popularized and spread abroad through the media, when fashion and the quest for publicity are all around us, a concern with protecting the claims of originality may seem to some a quaint survival from the past, or even a perverse effort to deter the spread of knowledge. Nevertheless, with the academic world, where advancing knowledge remains the highest calling, scholars must give full and fair recognition to the contributors to that enterprise, both for the substance and for the formulation of their findings and interpretations. This is a major area in academia, at least, but also in these other professions where you will find yourself making contributions and not getting credit. And it seems to be just part of the system, and it's difficult to see how everybody making a contribution on a committee where maybe you send an email with 2 or 3 ideas that somehow mushroom and blossom into a key component of some type of a report or recommendation, and your name doesn't follow that. So in most cases there's not much that you do other than make note of it on your annual reports that you did make a substantial contribution. But this is a significant situation of concern, where you get a mishmashing of many contributors' ideas, and each contributor doesn't always and can't always get the credit that they deserve. But you have to protect your own interests is a big part of it in that instance. So the definition is seen here. Just want to check. I have these in higher magnification. So the definition continues. excuse me, I do need to read these. So even within the academic community, however, there are complexities and shades of differences. So we saw an example already. Another, a writer of textbooks rests on the labors of hundreds of authors of monographs who cannot all be acknowledged. The derivative nature of such work is understood, and even when it is well and skillfully done, applauded. A poet, composer, or painter may quote the creation of another artist deliberately without explanation as a means of deeper exploration of meaning and in the expectation that knowledgeable readers, listeners, or viewers will appreciate the illusion and delight in it. So there are even lapses, regrettable but not always avoidable, in which a long-buried memory of something read resurfaces as a seemingly new thought. This is a very dangerous area here for all of us. We might give an idea to a colleague just in passing. A week later, it comes to their mind and seems like a great idea, and they somehow have forgotten that you had mentioned it to them. A very challenging area to deal with in science. But none of these situations diminishes the central certainty. Taking over the ideas, methods, or written words of another without acknowledgement and with the intention that they be taken as the work of the deceiver is plagiarism. Intention equivalent to motivation here. Have to demonstrate, have to prove that intention and motivation were present in determining the seriousness of the offense. In this case, of course, plagiarism. It is theft of a special kind, for the true author still retains the original ideas and words, yet they are diminished as that author's property, and a fraud is committed upon the audience that believes those ideas and words originated with the deceiver. Plagiarism is not limited to the academic community, but has perhaps its most pernicious effects in that setting, again because we openly share ideas in academia so extensively. It is the antithesis of the honest labor that characterizes true scholarship, and without which mutual trust and respect among scholars is impossible. Here are the precepts on the statement of plagiarism by the American Association of University Professors, and I do have this enlarged on the subsequent slides. The first precept is, in his or her own work, the professor must scrupulously acknowledge every intellectual debt for his ideas, methods, and expressions by means appropriate to the form of communication. So this is a key thing here. A committee report may not be considered appropriate if you list every single person's contribution. You can list the committee members as contributors, but typically you don't have a long list of who contributed what and so on and so forth. It might be documented somewhere in the paper trail of submission of ideas, development of ideas, and the writing and revision of the report. But I think you see the point there. It really is dependent upon the form of communication, the extent to which direct contribution is acknowledged. Any discovery of suspected plagiarism should be brought at once to the attention of the affected parties, and as appropriate to the profession at large through proper and effective channels. So here is obligation. We are obligated to act on this statement, on this precept, and as well as appropriate, and the attention to the parties involved first. So a local attempt, the most local attempt to resolve the matter, and then on up through the proper and effective channels. So this is typically through reviews in or communications to relevant scholarly journals as well if it involves a publication. Committee B of the association, the AAUP, the acronym for the American Association of University Professors, stands ready to provide its good offices in resolving questions of plagiarism. So there are professional resources to help guide us in the decision-making process on how to act if we suspect plagiarism has occurred. So immediate action sometimes is more dangerous than slow-paced, very careful action to make sure that all the documentation and evidence is in hand before proceeding, either independently or in collaboration with other professional societies. Professors should work to ensure that their universities and professional societies adopt clear guidelines, codes of ethics respecting plagiarism, and you will find codes of ethics on plagiarism posted for students on the website for UTSA in the student bulletin or information booklet that are appropriate to the disciplines involved, and it should insist that regular procedures be in place to deal with violations to those guidelines. The gravity of a charge of plagiarism by whomever it is made must not diminish the diligence exercised in determining whether the accusation is valid. So care to proceed with discrimination and reasoning and the collection of evidence, get the proof such that the accusation can be proved and not end up being a mere assertion. Remember, assertion is reasoning without evidence. In all cases, the most scrupulous procedural fairness must be observed, and penalties must be appropriate to the degree of the offense. And as well, confidentiality is key in this. If you find yourself in a situation like this, merely telling everyone in the world is not respecting the confidentiality of the accused and is outside of the proper procedures in every case. Scholars must make clear the respective contributions of colleagues on a collaborative project, and professors who have the guidance of students as their responsibility must exercise the greatest care not to appropriate a student's ideas, research, or presentation to the professor's benefit. To do so is to abuse power and trust. So there probably isn't any clear-cut list of punishments for plagiarism globally in each particular institution or case. They are determined. So another example is plagiarism and the procedures and penalties within an academic institution as relates to students. But it also is far-reaching for faculty and could lead to dismissal. In dealing with graduate students, professors must demonstrate a precept by example, the necessity of rigorous honesty in the use of sources and of utter respect for the work of others. The same expectations apply to the guidance of undergraduate students, with a special obligation to acquaint students new to the world of higher education with its standards and the means of ensuring intellectual honesty. And this, of course, is what we are participating within through this course presently. So the conclusions then: any intellectual enterprise by an individual, a group of collaborators, or a profession is a mosaic, the pieces of which are put in place by many hands. Viewed from a distance, it should appear a meaningful whole, but the long process of its assemblage must not be discounted or misrepresented. Anyone who is guilty of plagiarism not only harms those most directly affected, but also diminishes the authority and credibility of all scholarship and all creative arts, and therefore ultimately harms the interest of the broader society. So the term harm shows up in here throughout. Therefore, harm invokes the principle of non-maleficence and borders on legality, and thereby justifies dismissal of individuals from their appointments. So this ranges from students to all employees of any nature. We have seen newspaper reporters where plagiarism was proved, purely copying reports contributed by other individuals and putting it in print without giving credit, and doing so repeatedly in some cases, being detected, proven, and losing their jobs. Even here in San Antonio, a local news weathercaster was taking information from the internet and presenting it as their own, and when detected and the investigation completed, found guilty, and position was terminated. So loss of appointment, terminating position, is most likely to be the major outcome, but depending upon the extent of harm and the documentation of intention by uh, the guilty person, it could lead to um, fines by the legal system, and maybe even internment within the jail or prison. So the danger of plagiarism for teaching, learning, and scholarship is manifest. The need vigorously to maintain standards of professional integrity are compelling. So it is essential. Then we end with just a brief discussion of a case study adapted from Shakeh Katefian from the Association of American Medical Colleges, teaching the responsible conduct of research through a case study approach. We had used this text in the past for the class, but have since dropped it due to just too many textbooks required for the course. But this is a case study from that. Dr. Charles, a mid-career faculty member, was revising and updating a book chapter. This led her to review other articles on the same subject to help determine what new material to cover. During the course of her reading, she came upon a chapter in a major text by Dr. Long, a department chair in a leading psychology department, that contained long passages from her previous chapter without attribution. Dr. Charles called Dr. Long, so went straight to the affected party, and confronted him with her finding. Notice that we have gender differences here that should be significant in your assessment of the situation and the responses of the accused. At first, he vehemently denied having used any of Dr. Charles' text inappropriately. Dr. Charles then faxed Dr. Long copies of the offending passages and ostensibly her original chapter for comparison purposes. After some delay, Dr. Long finally responded, acknowledging that the language was indeed remarkably similar. He noted that he had engaged younger members, so trying to pass the buck, but ultimately responsible still, of his research team to write portions of the chapter because he was very busy at the time that the deadline was approaching. Inexcusable just the same. So reasons but not reasoning. Reasoning comes before, reasons come after. Furthermore, to defend himself, he pointed out that much of the original research on which her chapter was based was derived from the work of his team. He admitted only to negligence in not adequately monitoring the activities of his students and subordinates. Dr. Charles replied that the students' other team members were not acknowledged in Dr. Long's chapter either, and that admission of plagiarism required more than an apology. She indicated her intention to report the matter to Dr. Long's dean and the editor of the text, and these seem very much so to be the appropriate channels of communication to express such concerns. Did Dr. Charles act appropriately? Seems to have acted appropriately, going up through the channels, approaching the party first, and then not being able to resolve it there, going up the levels of command within academia and to the publishers. Seem to have evidence in place, uncertain of what type of counseling Dr. Charles may have sought in the actual approach, in other words, how to communicate with Dr. Long. Considering the differences in status between herself and Dr. Long, what professional risks was she taking, if any? Very likely many risks professionally, and placing herself at risk for personal attack. It is not so uncommon for males to express that females overreact, So we see that as being built in here, the gender differences with the female accusing the male. And I am not stating that there's any fact to that distinction. There are gender differences in behavior. We generally accept that. But this is related to my point that Dr. Charles might have sought some type of professional counseling. There are offices within every institution on how to approach the matter, possibly writing the correspondence and having it reviewed and edited so that it could not be misinterpreted as being outlandish in any fashion or evident of any type of overreaction. Remember, spoken word is just vibrating air. Vibration ends, the spoken word is gone. There's no actual evidence other than possibly being able to document the phone call. So written word is can be reviewed and improved and approved by appropriate authorities, and is much more difficult to challenge or just merely to say, never heard it, you never said that in the conversation. Anyway, did Dr. Long do anything wrong? I am convinced that Dr. Long did make many mistakes, whether they are oversights or intentional, can't be determined from the data that we have. Seems to be presented as an oversight, therefore we are expecting retractions, professional apologies. I'm not certain what other sanctions might be imposed. So the obligations he violated was responsibility and accountability for the work he had people contribute, didn't review it carefully, didn't meet with them, just didn't take the time, was racing to meet the deadline. Obviously was obligated to give credit to wherever credit was due. Would your answer be different if he were copying his own previous writings instead of someone else's? If the situation was exactly the same, no, my answer would not be different, because if you publish your words, then you sign a transfer of copyright agreement. You cannot reuse those exact words without permission from the owner, because even though you wrote them first, you don't own them anymore once you publish them. It's very important to understand. You need permission to use them exactly the same. Paraphrasing is not such a challenging task, and it is the appropriate approach and accepted approach for overcoming the use of your own creative writing. What should Dr. Long's dean consider in deciding on a course of action? It seems unlikely that you would dismiss someone or possibly even generate a major internal investigation. Should certainly collect all of the evidence and perform his own investigation and have something in the file that the investigation occurred, and if found guilty, then that would be a diminishing factor in the next annual review for merit in the year in which it occurred. Also might consider some other action of a review group looking at the publications for a period of time. So there's a variety of things that a dean might be able to do without invoking full action and investigation by the institution. The institution should be informed, but not necessarily invited to act and respond. And the report should be provided. So what would the editor of Dr. Long's text consider and do? Certainly public retraction, and since it's a textbook, there's money being generated, so I'm not sure what would happen there. There might be a need to share some of the revenue with the original author, Dr. Charles. What would Dr. Charles' editor consider and do? So public statements, and if money's involved, sharing of the profits. Again, if they own those exact words and they are published and sold for profit, they deserve some of the profit. What obligations as mentors does Dr. Long have to his students and research team members? So, was it fair to dump this on the students and the research team members? Certainly was not appropriate to overlook acknowledgement of their efforts. It's very deceiving to the audience, the people buying the text. What obligations as senior investigator and author? Certainly the obligation to acknowledge credit for any contributions. Definitely as a role model, not a good thing to do. Just going too rapidly and not being careful. These are not signs of high level of integrity. Do you see any role in this case that might be played by Dr. Long's students and team members? Yeah, definitely. If they plagiarized, somebody did it, somebody knew it, somebody copied and pasted, and they're going to be investigated for sure. So this ends